ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Tech Showdown. My name is Kevin, this is my co-host Teddy, and today we're going to be talking about the MSI Leopard GP60 2QF-866AU. And if you don't really understand all of that, it's the one with the 4210H CPU, the 950M GPU, and the 15.6-inch screen. But before we get into this laptop review, you might have noticed I have GTX 980 Ti's in SLI in my rig at the moment. So if you want to see how those go, click over here and that will take you to a video on the other channel I host called Playtech TV, where I did some benchmarking with the 980 Ti's in SLI against some other graphics cards. But for today, we're going to be talking about this laptop, and our next video will be the 980 Ti versus the GTX 980 Showdown. So let's get into it with this guy then. Now this one's quite popular because of the price point it comes into. So it's quite a good price to performance point, especially with the GPU it's featuring. So I think it gets quite a bit of interest mainly for that reason. But let's go over the exterior first. So it has this brushed metal look, which I find is getting just a little bit old now, personally. I mean, you can see it's just a fingerprint magnet, but I just don't think it, I mean, it was cool the first couple of times I saw it, but to me personally anyways, as someone that does quite a few laptop reviews, this is getting a little bit boring. I would have liked to have seen something a little bit better, or at least a little bit more funky maybe. So yeah, there's red accents around the keyboard, which do spice it up though in typical MSI fashion, so that looks pretty good, and the matte black around the screen is a bit questionable. I think it looks a bit cheap, and just overall this laptop, I mean it's MSI, so it's going to be well built, but it does have a bit of flex in it. You might be able to see with my hand there. Yeah, it could give a better feel. That's what I'm going for there. Now let's go over I/O. So we'll start round at the front, and we see it just has a card reader in the front there, which is quite interesting. They usually don't put them in the very front, well, not the ones I've seen lately. Jumping around here to the left hand side, we see headphone and mic jack, gold plated, so that's quite good to see. Twin USB 3.0, a full size HDMI, and a USB 2.0 slot. Then we see one of the vents for the fan, where the AC adapter goes in, and that's a secure lock down the back left there. On the back we see nothing at all except the battery. And then flipping around to the right hand side, we see that it has an Ethernet port, VGA, which I'm quite interested to know why they did that, a USB charging port, and a DVD disc, a DVD-RW disc drive. So don't usually see optical drives these days. Some people out there might like it. Personally, I'm not really a fan of it, just because I've probably used my Blu-ray player in my rig probably maybe twice since I've built this rig, and that was a while ago. So yeah, I don't really find much use for them at all, but some people might. Now let's get into those specs then. So under the hood, it features a Intel Core i5 4210H, so that's a 2-core, 4-thread, 2.9 GHz base and 3.5 GHz CPU, so that's pretty decent there. Chipset wise, this is on the Intel Shark Bay HM86, pretty standard there. Screen wise, 15.6-inch Full HD anti-glare display. That's Full HD is 1080p if you don't know, so that means 1920 by 1080. GPU wise, so it has the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 950M. So that's one of the main reasons people like looking at this guy, because that is quite a good GPU for the price point. It's kind of like a medium level GPU in terms of its performance, mobile GPU that is. So it does pretty good, and VRAM wise this is coming with a GDDR3 2GB, so could do a little bit better there, but not complaining too much. So system memory wise is coming with 8GB, so it's a single 8GB stick of DDR3. It has a maximum of 16GB though, so you can throw in another 8GB stick if you really want to bring the system memory up a bit more. Storage wise, no SSD here, which is a bit disappointing and a bit confusing since it has it says M.2 SATA SSD on the sticker on the inside, so a little bit confusing there. But yeah, it's just a single 1TB 7200 RPM drive. That's not the end of the world since it's running Windows 8, so boot times and stuff are still fairly good. But I mean, in this day and age, I expect an SSD to be in all laptops, especially gaming ones. Even just a small one, you know, to get you by just for the OS, just to make things snappy. I would rather that. But it doesn't have it, so yeah. Now, communications wise, it's coming with killer gaming LAN, Bluetooth 4.0 and wireless 802.11ac, so all pretty standard there. Now, dimensions wise, it's coming in at 383 millimeters wide, 249 millimeters deep, and 32 millimeters tall. So it's definitely not a small laptop, and it's coming in at 2.6 kilograms with the battery in. So it's definitely not small and light, but this is primarily a gaming laptop, so you can't really expect too much there. And warranty wise, it's coming with a 2-year MSI pickup and return warranty. Now, let's turn this guy on. Now let's talk about the screen while it's turning on. So the screen is just a 1080p 60Hz panel, which is pretty, you know, standard. So nothing really out of the ordinary there. One thing I did notice was that the viewing angles on this particular one seem pretty horrendous, especially in the verticals. So I was a little bit disappointed there with that, but aside from that, it does a decent job, but it's just a pretty standard panel. I mean, it's nothing really too outrageous, too spectacular, or anything like that. It's just average, so I don't really consider this good, but I don't really consider it bad. But yeah, as I might be able to show you, the viewing angles are a bit, yeah, you can see it a bit there on the camera. Yeah, the viewing angles, not the best with this guy, but I mean, for most people you're just looking at it straight on anyway, so that's not the end of the world. Now, sound-wise, so it has front-facing speakers, you can see the two ones up here, up the top. So that's really good. I like that way better than having them on the bottom and then it gets muffled if you're using it on your lap, or you know, some of them, they're just not that good. You always want them on the top if possible. So that's good. The sound quality is pretty decent too. However, it has two big vices. The first is that it's too quiet. You end up using, I've had this before, I can't remember which laptop I was talking about in one of my previous reviews, just do so many. That it was just too quiet. You always end up hovering quite high up in the sound volume. So that was one thing, although it wasn't too bad, but you just still tended to be on the higher end of things. And also, when you went above, say, about 90% or say 85% on the volume, it would get quite tinny sounding. Now, anyone that's owned a few laptops will know what this is. It kind of sounds like it's the whole laptop's vibrating from the frequency of the sound, and it just gives it this real tinny noise to it. So that was another issue that I didn't really like as far as sound quality goes. So as far as sound goes, I'd say it's good because it's front facing, and it's good when it's under like 90 or 85%. But when you start getting in the very high end of it, it decays quite badly. Now, keyboard-wise, so the keyboard is done by SteelSeries, which is quite common on these MSI gaming laptops, and it's just fantastic, just like normal. I really, really like them. The layout is fantastic. I don't really have any complaints with the layout, except, no, none really, actually. Yeah, no real big issues. I like how they have the volume and brightness down on the arrow keys. As you guys know, I quite like that. So that was pretty good. It has quite decent travel, I mean, by laptop standards, and quite decent feel, so typing on it was a breeze, and I thought it'd be really good. This would be great for not only gaming, but for typing up documents or anything like that. And just overall, it's just a great great keyboard for typing on, and, you know, for gaming on. I just had no real complaints with this. SteelSeries just does it again. It's nothing I haven't already added to any other of the SteelSeries laptop keyboards that we've covered before. Now, the touchpad was also really solid. My finger slid really easily on it, so that was really good. It had just the right amount of sensitivity for me, so I like that too. Size-wise, they got it pretty nice. Maybe a tiny bit bigger would have been a little more. I would have liked that a little more. Aside from that, it was pretty good. Gestures sometimes were a little bit of an issue, but most people don't use them all that much, so that's not really the end of the world. And clicking was also really nice and easy to use, so that was really good too. Moving on to performance now, and it did a fairly decent job. GPU wise it did really good, well, with that 950M in it, but CPU wise it just did about average, which is kind of what I expected going into it. Alright, let's get into the benchmarks now. So the first one I did was the Intel Extreme Tuning Utility benchmark, and the CPU scored 349 marks, which is just about average. I mean, it's about average for a laptop, I mean. So yeah, nothing really outrageous there. Now in the Unigine Valley Extreme HD benchmark, it scored 13.3 frames per second average, which is a little low, but I mean, it's a bit out of this graphics card's reach, so it still did a decent job. And in the Heaven 4.0 DirectX 11 benchmark, it scored 13.9 frames per second. That's with everything maxed out. So those average frames may seem a little bit low. For medium kind of requirement games or low requirement games, it did excellent. Like your League of Legends, Dota 2 gamers out there, are you going to be able to play those games maxed out easily with no worries at all. For higher games than that, you're probably going to have to bump the settings down to maybe like a medium setting. You should be able to play them at 1080p. Probably, like, depending on the game, it's very hard to say. But I'd say you'd be safe with probably a medium setting, maybe high if it's a slightly older title, with the filters either on low or off completely. So it should do you for most of your gaming needs really good. This is kind of like, it's not a desktop replacement. This is just, you have your big, powerful rig at home, and then this guy is just supposed to get you by when you're out and about, or maybe you go away, or whatever your case may be. So in that case, it does pretty good with this kind of medium level graphics card it has in it, the 950M, which is a big step up over the 850M. So you do have to keep that in mind. Now let's get to temperatures. How about that? So temperatures wise, it did fairly good for a laptop. So in Intel Extreme Tuning Utility, when I did the benchmark, the CPU went up to 86 degrees Celsius, which is a little bit on the toasty side, but it wasn't thermal throttling at all or anything like that, so that's no worries. And during the Unigine Valley Extreme HD benchmark, the GPU went up to 69 degrees Celsius. So that's fairly good as well. Yeah, I don't really have too much of an issue with these temps. They're about average, so they're not insanely good, but they're not bad either. There won't be any throttling there or anything like that. And the laptop itself doesn't tend to feel too hot, at least on the top anyways. The bottom's a different story though. Up in this top right corner, the vent here, if you have like your leg or something, or anything near it, even just putting my hand there now, there's a lot of heat coming out of that vent. So you do need to consider that as well. Noise-wise though, I was pretty disappointed. So it did very bad in terms of noise. I don't know if you can hear right now. You might be able to hear that, you might not. I mean, look, you can see it's just on the desktop. There's only the normal background programs running, and the fan is still quite, going along quite a bit. So the fan noise at idle or very, just browsing the web and stuff like that, is just too high. It was really distracting. I didn't like it at all, and it wasn't very good. And then when you played games, which, you can wear headphones, I said that before, you can drown it out. It did go up quite high too. So noise-wise, I was quite disappointed with it in that area. So that wasn't too good. Now, battery life was another area where I was very disappointed. The battery life in this is absolutely pathetic. So with sort of average use, browsing the web, watching videos, all that stuff, I was getting around, 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours. And with gaming, that was dropping down to, like an hour and a half, or, it's just not that good. Gaming laptops, I know, are not meant to have good battery life, and, you're going to be playing most of the time with it on the charger anyways. But that still doesn't excuse the fact that, you know, like just casual stuff, that it only gets around 2.5, and that wasn't very good. Maybe if you drop it direct on power saver mode and then drop the brightness way down, you might get, you know, over 3 hours with it. But really, it's still not that ideal, and I really do expect more, even out of gaming laptops. Now, software-wise, it comes with some decent pre-installed software. So there's Sound Blaster Cinema, which is good if you want to set up the audio. Killer Network Manager, which, you know, some people might have a use for. System Control Manager, which is somewhat useful, but it's pretty basic. And my favorite, the MSI Dragon Gaming Center, which is a pretty decent pre-installed program. It gives you lots of information, and it's quite nice. I just think it's, out of all of them, it's probably the most useful program that it comes with pre-installed. Which brings us now to the conclusion. So it has decent build quality, but it feels a little bit cheap, so they could have, you know, MSI could have stepped it up a little bit here. I know they're trying to hit a price point with it, but still I would have liked it to be just have a bit better feel to it overall. Specs wise, comes in pretty good with the specs it has for the price point, so that was quite good. And the performance out of the 950M is a good medium level for a laptop. So I was quite impressed there. Do decent performance for most people, be able to set up their games and play most of their games at a pretty decent setting, medium setting as I said, or if it's a lower requirement game you should be able to max it out, no worries. The keyboard by SteelSeries is fantastic like always, and the touchpad was also very, very solid, so that they both did really well. Heat-wise it did decent. But yeah, it was nothing out, you know, nothing too spectacular. Sound quality wise was good, except in the very high ranges it kind of wasn't too good. The fan noise was just way too high though, so I was a bit disappointed there. And the battery life was pathetic, which I've come to expect with some gaming laptops out there. So who would I recommend this for in my consumer talk? If performance is your number one priority and you don't care about other things, you don't care about the pathetic battery life and you don't care about all the noise, and performance is the main thing you're looking for, then this is excellent for that. The performance in a 950M, especially at the price point when other laptops might not even have a 950M in them, is very good. So yeah, it's worth it for that. If performance is your number one priority, then yes, you should consider this guy, because that 950M is going to get you by really, really well. However, performance isn't everything, and you know, some people out there will be launching something that's a bit more well-rounded. It may not have the performance, but it will still be a great laptop. And that's why I would personally rather recommend, if performance isn't your number one priority, the Asus ZenBook. This is a UX303. This one comes with the GT840M GPU and the touchscreen. This is just a much more well-rounded laptop. Doesn't have the huge amount of noise, nowhere near the noise. This guy on load is like the GP60 at idle, so nowhere near the noise. This one still gets a little bit hot, but it's overall just a better all-round laptop. I did do a review on this guy, its own review, so if you want to click on it, I'll leave an annotation that'll take you to that video. And this one, though it may not be anything spectacular, it just does very few things wrong, and it's a more well-rounded laptop than the GP60. So this would be the one I would recommend if performance is not your number one and you want a more well-rounded laptop, then get this guy. However, if performance is your number one, then get this guy. So that's going to sum up this video, if I can get my words right. What's that, Teddy? I need to learn how to speak English. Teddy's right. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As I said earlier, we will be doing the 980 Ti versus GTX 980 Showdown, so that'll be coming up in the next video. So subscribe to Tech Showdown so you don't miss that video. I thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.